I can tell you, being forced to remain silent while a lying, cheating, scheming priest is destroying your reputation publicly and unable to offer any defense, there's no words. Well, 'tis the season, apparently, for all corruption to be dragged out into the light. So in that spirit, I'd like to reveal some corruption I've never talked about since it happened almost 10 years ago. Earlier this summer, I talked about how virtually every single day of my childhood, as far back as I'm able to remember, there was sexual abuse, some physical, most psychological sexual abuse. The far weight of it was that. The feelings, the emotions, and the thoughts that develop in your mind, in my mind, from all of that, they never leave. They lay in hiding, so to speak, ready to be refelt all over again because, according to my therapy team, it's the nature of them to be felt until they're confronted. And believe me, confronting them, it's a horror show. The feelings are betrayal and isolation and worthlessness. And when the right circumstances arise, those feelings animate. They reemerge with the same ferocity and intensity as when they first occurred. So, using spiritual corruption as the springboard as a demonstration of how corruption in general, which is ultimately a betrayal of trust, can be so damaging. Now, the case I'm going to tell you about right now, I know about firsthand because I was the victim of it. Moral and spiritual corruption by a priest, his bishop, and the bishop's right-hand man. It involves a Canadian priest who broke the seal of confession in an outlandish fashion. So I charged him in canon law courts at the Vatican, brought a suit against him. 3 years it took for that, but he was found guilty and he was actually excommunicated. Now, for some background, this priest had become very involved with the work and the routine of Church Militant, what I had established in Detroit, back in 2005, 2006. He had, in fact, become my spiritual director. So talking about my past sinful life, as well as in confession, regular confessions, that was routine. Eventually, he developed a disordered attachment to me, and he used that position of being my spiritual director to try and destroy me. He went to a couple of our donors and blabbed all sorts of things about me, and together they all concocted a blackmail plot to get me to resign my public position so at least some of them could take over the operations of Church Militant. I later came to find out, by the way, by one of the people who was involved in this and came to me and apologized and, asked for forgiveness and all that, which of course I did. He told me that the infighting between them, meaning the priest, one of these donors, and a staff member who was part of all of it, kind of like an inside mole operations. They were fighting with each other about who would take control after they dispatched me. It was a savage effort on their part because part of the plot involved this priest remaining hidden, abusing his spiritual authority over me to try and convince me I had some spiritual obligation before God to acquiesce to the demands of these blackmailers. He was one of them, but again, he was hidden. It was a horrible time and went on for a couple of weeks, this whole little plot thing. The inner turmoil would be the best term I can really kind of think of at this time to describe what I felt like inside, but that was just the beginning. After thinking about it and all of that and all the stuff you go through, I didn't agree to their blackmail and their extortion, to those demands. So he contacted almost the entire staff through another staff member, the other guy who was in on the plot, who, by the way, get this, has gone on to get ordained himself for a Wisconsin diocese. People now look at him and are like, oh, Father. And yet he was part of a plot to destroy me. Anyway, this priest told the staff, with the assistance of this inside guy, all of my past sins that he had learned of in the sacrament of confession, as well as under the mantle of spiritual direction, to which the seal of confession extends. And by the way, if anybody's going to have a canon law argument about that, that was the conclusion of the CDF, the Congregation for Doctrine of the Faith. If you're in spiritual direction and a priest reveals something in that, that's exactly the same as breaking the seal of confession, because the seal extends to that, as it should. So then after I discovered his treachery, the priest's treachery and his betrayal, he and his other plotters just joined forces with a notorious anti-Semite, well-known in some Catholic circles. And get this, he published a book. Yeah, actually published a book, which not only had some confessional matter in it, but was mostly a pack of lies and conjecture built around that confessional matter. Like the claim, for example, that my father sodomized me when I was 6 months old. That is a total, flat-out lie. Now, as an aside, if you think the legacy media can lie through their teeth, well, believe me, brother, you ain't seen nothing when it comes to supposed Catholics who seem to take on the mantle of, oh, this is being done for the glory of God, so therefore I can commit any sin I want as long as it benefits the glory of God in my eyes. Bullshit. As I said, the publication was for me a bridge too far. So I went to the canon law courts of the church, specifically the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, the CDF. It's pretty heavy stuff. My canon lawyer told me that the officials there in Rome, the judges, the tribunal members, they were beyond flabbergasted at the case. They searched back, get this, centuries to see if there had ever been anything like this. Not just breaking the seal, which unfortunately occasionally does happen from time to time, but it's always very confined in all of that. But with publishing sins mixed in with lies for public consumption, their conclusion was this was groundbreaking and without precedent. The case carried on for almost 3 full years, and a major point to consider is that in these sorts of cases, an order called papal secrecy is placed on everyone involved in it. It's kind of like a church gag order, and to break the secrecy as the case is being adjudicated, if you do that, you are automatically excommunicated, meaning you have no access to the sacraments. You can't go to confession. And for Catholics, that's about as close as you can get to a death penalty. Only the Pope himself personally can lift that excommunication. That's why it's called papal secrecy. As it turns out, this priest just kept on talking to whoever would listen. I know because the people he'd tell would call me, lying and betraying and ignoring that order of secrecy. He published multiple YouTube videos, continuing to smear me in thinly veiled terms, and anyone who knew what he was saying. I, on the other hand, terrified of saying anything publicly in my own defense. Heck, I was terrified of saying things, to people in the apostolate at Church Militant who knew a good deal of this stuff. I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, or it's a horrible place to be. Anyway, didn't want to say anything because of fear of being excommunicated, so I just held my silence. I can tell you, being forced to remain silent while a lying, cheating, scheming priest is destroying your reputation publicly and unable to offer any defense, there's no words. This Canadian priest was so treacherous that the Vatican judges, with literal, undeniable proof I provided from text messages I had on my phone, they ruled he had perjured himself, get this, not once, not twice, but 3 different times, formally committing perjury. That's what the order said. A priest taking an oath before Almighty God lied over and over and over again to the church to save his own ass. As I said, the judges at the Vatican ordered the priest excommunicated, and here's another part of this, also ordered his bishop there in Canada to publicly announce the excommunication. Why? So people wouldn't fall into the same trap and trust this scandalous priest and the whole thing happen again. As it turned out, the bishop and his top aide, the chancellor, another scheming... Anyway, just ignored the order and pretended it was too confusing to them. 3 months later, after getting that order, his bishop petitioned the Vatican to reverse the excommunication. And when he did that, he sidestepped all sorts of church law in the process. So when I got word that the priest had been restored, my canon lawyer and I demanded a meeting with the bishop, which, likely owing to some notoriety that I had at the time in the church, he kind of probably felt forced to agree to meet with me. So they did. To my face, across the table in the diocesan meeting room at the chancery, they lied to me and my lawyer, my canon lawyer. They said the order from Rome was unclear. My ass, it was unclear. The first line of that order, it was one page, said a full public disclosure of the ruling of excommunication must be made. Of course it has to be made, so people are not to trust this loser priest. The last paragraph of said that the documents, all of the forms and all of that, those must remain private. So the bishop and his lying, cheating bishop and his lying, cheating chancellor there used that as their excuse to not announce to the faithful in their diocese that there was a priest who had been excommunicated for breaking the seal because it would make the bishop look bad. Rome took the bishop's word for it when he wrote his little thing. It's called a votum. He wrote a little thing. It's nice. He's really kind of sorry and all this. So can you please lift the excommunication and restore him? He sent it in. They're like, okay, well, we're not there. That's his bishop. So sure, if that's what his bishop says, I guess that's the case. Stamp it, move on. Rome took the bishop's word for it and reversed their order. No public disclosure of the danger this priest is. No apology from him to me or anyone. No restitution for the horrible crap he did. Not a blessed thing. The priest lied about breaking the seal of confession, and he got caught. Then, when he was excommunicated, and the bishop was ordered to make that public, the bishop and his staff went into cover-up mode, made up some bullshit about why the excommunication should be lifted, and Rome granted it. The corruption is atrocious. And almost 10 years later, it's all forgotten and blown over. What's the effect 10 years later to me in this case? But to a larger point that I want to get at, to any victim of injustice stemming from corruption. For me, in this case, to this day, going to confession is pretty damn difficult every time. The memory of all of that comes right back to life as though it's still kind of ongoing in some way. No matter what I have to confess, big, little, doesn't matter, I change my voice. I will not go face to face except in the most rare of circumstances. And I don't even like standing in line waiting to go into the confessional, the box, for fear of something of all of this somehow reigniting. All that said, and for the record, even though I was the victim of hierarchical cover-up, not to mention sacramental psychological abuse, sucked. Even though I was a victim of all that at the hands of this wicked priest, his crooked bishop, and his chancery and phony-ass Catholic lay people, not a single ounce of this nightmare shakes my faith in the church herself. Unfortunately, I can't say the same about myself. Scoundrels and rotten people have always been in the church. Sinners, traitors, all of it. They're kind of the day-to-day population of the church. Hopefully, with an eye to some of them at least repenting and hopefully becoming saints, that Jesus died for us all for that to happen. That doesn't make the church herself bad. After all, Jesus did have Judas. Coming to you from Houston, Texas, I'm Gary Michael Voris. God love you.